Today we're going to walk through using the ExtraHop CLI, and we are going to use it in a lab environment and look at how simple this can be to set up and deploy. So for our quick example today, we're going to be using the Pi coding agent. I'm choosing this agent for our example because it is incredibly slim and simple, works across all platforms, and often I think represents one of the most minimal implementations of an agent harness. It's essentially just a slim wrapper between the LLM and the computer that only has bash, read, and write. We're going to be doing this from an Ubuntu Linux instance. I'm running in WSL on a Windows PC. So I've already installed the Pi coding agent, but to show you how trivial that can be, I'm going to grab the curl command for that installation and drop it in here in my CLI, where it will fetch the package. It will ask me if I'd like to reinstall it. I will hit no to do nothing and clear the screen. However, if I would have hit yes, that entire installation process takes about 8 seconds. With the agent installed, I want to show you briefly what my working environment looks like here. So this is the directory that we are working. Now, what we have available here is the ExtraHop CLI tool. So this is available from customer.extrahop.com from our user forums in the Agentic Ops group. Inside of here, I have already performed one investigation, and that investigation lives under investigations based on the detection ID that it kicked it off under with the report here. And I want to show a little bit more about what exists in this directory by doing a show all to show a few more files that exist here. So I have a .env, which contains the credentials to an ExtraHop lab environment. I also have a .env.eh lab, which contains the credentials to a different lab environment, which we'll do our test from today. And then in addition to that, I have this .py directory. So Pi allows you to store things like skills, etc., directly in the working directory you want to work from, and it will remain localized to that directory. So we can do testing with certain skills in this directory, move to a different directory, and then have a clean working environment based on wherever we invoke Pi from. Another reason why I like to use that agent for testing and exercises such as this. So let's explore what we do have installed in addition to just the CLI. So I'm going to go into the .py directory, and then we're going to go into skills, which exists in there, and we're going to look at this. So I have 2 skills installed here. These are some skills that I developed that augment my workflows around things that have to do with Extra. The ExtraHop architecture skill here essentially gives the agent a bedrock understanding for how an ExtraHop works. So it contains documentation for most of the primitives available, and I find this to be a useful sidecar to using MCP servers or CLIs to interact with ExtraHop as it fills in knowledge gaps. Having said that, absolutely not essential. The CLI alone contains significant help documentation for the agent, and the quality of the investigations that I've gotten are quite similar with or without the architecture skill. The SOC investigation report skill here simply provides the agent with guidance for how I would like it to write up investigations for me. So this is where I've gone in and said, instead of just assuming what should or should not be involved and maybe printing it to standard out or writing me a markdown, I would specifically like you to look for or create an investigations directory, and then in that directory, create a new directory for any investigation you do, and then always emit a report as an HTML artifact so I can view it in a browser, and use this template. So inside of the SOC investigation report, you see that assets report template. This saves some tokens, saves some time, gives the agent essentially a form to fill out for the investigation. And then it also, that template contains structure around a lot of the different types of information I want to make sure it covers. This helps set some guardrails around the level of effort and ensure that it completes the job to the level that I want. This is just an example of how I work with AI and how I think you should consider scaffolding your agents around your solutions, making sure that they have documentation available to them that supports the work that they're doing, and then making sure that if you have any strong opinions about the way work should be done, that those are also there as well. So this is the entire supporting infrastructure for this task. So these two skills plus the CLI itself. Okay, so we are going to go back a couple of levels, and we are now just sitting in this ExtraHop CLI directory where I have available to do testing, and I'm going to invoke the Pi agent. Perfect. So from here, we can now ask it to perform an investigation in a particular environment for a particular use case. I have a prompt that I've grabbed and put on my clipboard, so I'm going to drop that in now. We'll look at it together and talk a little bit about this investigation, and then I'm going to append a little note just to let it know which environment I want it to work in, since I do have two labs connected. So in this case, we're going to do an identity threat hunt. We have a user, Zachary.Edward, and we have noticed that in ExtraHop, and I'm actually going to expand this time window because this data goes back a little farther now. This is one I had worked on about a week ago. There's a rumor he's leaving to join a competitor. So I want to do an insider threat investigation on this person. So check all of his activity, make sure nothing suspicious has been going on, because we have some tips and some reason to think so. I'm just going to append to this prompt, use the .env.eh lab, I think it was, environment. So this is just steering it, since I do have those two connected labs. So we're going to kick that off and let it get to work. We are using GPT-5.5 on medium reasoning for this particular exercise. You'll notice here, Pi does a pretty good job of showing us all the thinking and skill and tool calls, and we can see that it did invoke the architecture and SOC investigation report. So now it's got that documentation substrate that it can pull from to understand how the solution works. Once again, not absolutely necessary, but does help kind of augment the process, fill in the gaps of the understanding. And then additionally, I've included that SOC investigation report to make sure I get a report that looks the way I want. So we're going to let it work for a few minutes and come back and have a look when it's done. Okay, it finished the threat hunt. It went ahead and output its findings to standard out here in the form of this kind of markdown table, which is great. But it also wrote our HTML file to the directory. So we will have a look at that. It looks like that is available to us right here. So we've got this Zachary Edward identity threat hunt now, this new directory that the agent created. I can go in and we've got this new HTML file, which I will launch in a browser. So we will pull that up here. Have a look together. So the way that this looks, the titling, the subtitling, the structure, inclusion of disposition, leading with the analyst summary, entities involved, breaking all those down here. Scope and timeline, where it was clearly able to go use the CLI in order to pull related detections, dig into sensitive SMB reads, find the pastebin activity, go through and enumerate some key questions and findings based on what it observed. I think is really a useful structure for interrogating the agent's reasoning. One of the biggest challenges I think we have when using agentic tools to do security investigations is making sure we comprehend the reasoning that was done and agree with the assessments based on the evidence. So leading with this analyst summary is great. It tells us that ExtraHop records specifically show us that this user identity, using this was able to read sensitive files, followed closely by encrypted TLS connections from the same host to pastebin. ExtraHop also has data exfil activity detection, showing some of that activity. Because the pastebin traffic was encrypted and we couldn't decrypt traffic going to an external entity, the network evidence proves access and transfer volume, doesn't prove the exact uploaded content, exactly as we'd expect. That's a great summary and tells me everything I need to know, but the rest serves as an interrogation surface that I can go through and see, okay, what all entities did it find? What was the scope and timeline so I understand the events and what occurred? Here's the collection, here's the exfil, here's the detection. How did you reason about this? What questions did you go find answers to? And what evidence exists. And I love that we have us calling out the specific evidence in these boxes, and we can jump down here and look at the evidence broken out here in this table. And then we can see what I like here as well. And part of that template design that I lead with is having it show, what it was able to determine and what's clean, what's confident, what it couldn't quite determine for one reason or the next. Maybe ExtraHop theoretically could do it, but in this scenario, we weren't able to for some reason. And then what can you not do with NDR that might be worth doing? I think that's very important as well, so we know where to take this. And then finally, the recommended next steps. You got to contain this and respond to it. You should investigate further by pulling these logs, and you should, potentially tune the detection if you'd like to do that. So this is a good example of using the ExtraHop CLI to do a threat hunt. I can also show we've done detection examples and quite a few other things. Let's zoom out a little bit though, and I'm going to go ahead and hit Control D to kill this agent, clear the screen, go up a level, and show that we also have the ExtraHop MCP server. So the results of doing investigations with the ExtraHop MCP server should be functionally roughly identical to using the CLI. These are two different interface surfaces that you can use based on your policies and the way you're building your security agents. So do you want your agents to pull MCP servers in and use the MCP protocol, go through MCP gateways? You're probably going to use EXMCP. On the other hand, if you're building more atomic agents that have everything that they need right there, or you're building a solution that's more based off conventional technologies like APIs, CLIs, and SDKs, then that's what the EXCLI is for. All of this is available to you once again on the ExtraHop forums, so I encourage you to go grab those tools or reach out to me, Thomas at extrahop.com, and I'm happy to help you get what you need, get you set up, walk you through some testing and examples, and go deeper on any of these subjects with you. This is all very fascinating, and I think that agents represent a tremendous efficiency bridge between how we've been doing investigations in the past and clearly how we can do them in the future. Using tools like this significantly expand the reach of our agents beyond what we're doing today when we start to give them surfaces and interfaces that they understand directly into our security tools. And then this becomes an exponential value curve when a single agent is able to reason across data from multiple sources, right? Not constrained only to the network context, but able to pull in host context, log context, et cetera, et cetera. It gets pretty exciting. So hopefully this was interesting. Hope you have a great day.